Hi everybody, I'm Sue Altmeyer and I'm a reference librarian here at University of Akron Law Library, and we're going to have an introduction to legal research. We're going to talk about an overview of different legal research sources, and we're going to talk about primary versus secondary authority as well as persuasive versus binding authority. This information is covered in page 3 and 4 of your legal research workbook. Okay, you can find legal information on Google. There's statutes on Google, cases, articles, etc. The problem is it's kind of scattered all over the web. It's not all in one place. The search mechanisms are not that sophisticated, not as sophisticated as you would find on a paid database. And there's not as much information. The coverage is just not as much as what you're going to find on Westlaw, Lexis, etc. So you might be tempted to start your research on Google, and some attorneys do that in practice. There's really nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's actually a good idea, but please don't just research on Google and that's it. What your emphasis really should be in law school is probably, Westlaw, Lexis, and Bloomberg Law. Additionally, these databases are very expensive. You get to use them in law school for free as part of your law school experience. So get to learn them so then when you get out into practice, you can use them efficiently. All right, there are other databases available. We're not really going to talk about them this semester, with the exception of CaseMaker, which is a low-cost database. We'll be talking about that later in the semester. Okay, and legal information is also in print. As you can imagine, before there were computer legal research databases, all the information was in print. And what's available in print really mirrors what's available in Lexis and Westlaw Online. It's the same stuff. Okay, so primary sources of law versus secondary sources. Primary sources of law means the law itself. It means the case opinions as written by judges, statutes as written by the legislature, regulations as written by administrative agencies, and constitutions such as the U.S. Constitution, a state constitution, the constitution of another country, etc. Those are all considered primary sources. Secondary sources are not the law itself. They discuss and explain the primary law. They put all these statutes and cases together for you and sort of explain maybe what the current state of the law is. And there's various types of secondary sources. We won't really get into the different types now. We're going to talk about that later. There are things like encyclopedias, practice books, law review articles, etc. Okay, so persuasive versus binding authority. Secondary sources, they're not the law itself, so they're always going to be persuasive only. What do I mean by that? If you write a brief and you cite to a case in that brief, you submit your brief to a court, is the court required to follow the same holding in the case that you cite? Or is it merely persuasive to that court? They could choose whether they want to follow that prior court opinion or not. Okay, so secondary sources are always persuasive. Primary sources can either be binding or persuasive. In general, statutes are usually always binding if they're the current statutes in force. Cases can be persuasive or binding, which we're going to get into a little bit now, but it requires a bit of background explanation on the court hierarchy. The highest court, well, let's start out with the trial court. In the trial court, what you happen is your trial. Both sides present witnesses, to try and get to the truth, and a trier of fact, a judge or a jury makes the decision. If the parties are not happy with that decision, they can appeal to an intermediate court. In the federal system, your trial court is the United States District Court. That's what it's called. The appellate court is called the U.S. Court of Appeals, and then from there you could appeal to the United States Supreme Court. This is just a little bit more detailed view of your court structure, and this also shows you the court hierarchy in a state court, in Ohio courts. It starts out at the trial court level, which can be your common pleas courts or municipal courts. Those decisions can be appealed to the what's called, confusingly enough, Ohio District Courts. That's the appellate courts in Ohio. And then that can be appealed to the Ohio Supreme Court. And Ohio Supreme Court cases, in some instances can be appealed to the United States Supreme Court. Okay, so what's mandatory or binding and what is persuasive or non-binding? So Constitution, statutes, and regulations within a jurisdiction are binding. Cases from higher courts in that same jurisdiction are also binding. Cases from other jurisdictions are merely persuasive. Cases from the same level in the same jurisdiction are merely persuasive, and cases from lower courts are merely persuasive. Okay, so to maybe get this concept down a little bit, here I have a map of the United States, and this shows the United States Circuit Courts. There are 11, circuits. So here in Ohio, you see Ohio on the map. It's in yellow. Ohio is in the 6th Circuit. In Ohio, there are 2 trial courts. There is the Northern District Court and the Southern District Court of Ohio. Okay. And there's also bankruptcy courts and everything like that. We're just going to kind of keep it somewhat simple for now. Okay, so if there is a case decided in the Ohio Northern District of Ohio, it is not binding on the Southern District of Ohio. It's merely persuasive. If there's a case in the Northern District of Ohio, it is only persuasive in, say, a federal court in Tennessee. However, if you have a 6th Circuit case, that is binding on all your district courts in Michigan, Ohio, Tennessee, Kentucky. All right? And if you have a United States Supreme Court decision, that's binding on all these circuits and all these districts all across the country. So hopefully that made a little bit more sense. So in the next video, we are going to talk about search plans and generating search terms.